With me working for him, he made an additional $97,000 that year. He says, Colby, thank you so much for this year. And he gives me a roll of cash. It's about 1.5 inches thick. So I go home and I open up this wad of cash. This f***ing gave me a wad of ones. $167 was the bonus. And I was making $10 an hour. And I asked him for a raise. I think I asked for 15. He said, I'll pay you 12 and don't ever ask me for another raise. I thought, okay, I'm going to start my own company.
Before we get into this week's episode, I'd like to quickly talk about the new studio that we're filming in. It's called Offset Studios. Myself and business partner Chris opened this up. It's a 3,000 square foot, 4-set building. Each set has a different vibe to it. Our goal was to create a space for individuals and businesses to tell their stories through the lens of a camera. Each set has a different vibe. We have a 70s set, a speakeasy, a very bright white room, and a kind of old school hair and makeup. Our idea is to kind of fill this with creative individuals that are looking to share their story online. I think that's enough blabbing. Let's get into the show. Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. This is episode number 210. I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. Before I get into it today, please subscribe to the show, maybe follow it, maybe send me a DM. I would appreciate it. Today's guest, Mindy Henyu, did this invite. I'd heard the name for a couple of years. I went back in my inbox and somebody in your circle sent me an email probably 3 years ago. Like, what about this guy on the show? And I was like, I can't remember what my response was, but then Mindy showed up at the studio and right away she started talking about you. And I was like, now's the time. So please name and who you are.
Yeah. My name's Colby Delorme. My traditional name is Ostamau Napio. I'm a 50-year-old, very recently turned 50-year-old entrepreneur, live in Calgary. I work all across Canada. I get to work in community, get to work with amazing people. And I'm just someone who's passionate about, elevating people or being a part of people's circles that, I if they bless me with the opportunity to be in their lives. So I think that's probably who I am.
50, hey, sneaks up on you.
Yeah, it snuck up, and I thought someone was asking me, so how do you feel about turning 50? I said, love it. And someone said to me, so not worried about turning 50? I said, no. Said my whole life, probably from the age of 18 on, I was always desiring to be older. And I said, really? Like, most people are always desiring to be younger. And I said, no, I always had the feeling like I would have things more figured out. I'd be where I was supposed to be, the things that I dreamt of being or having would all be in place if I were older. So I always desired that. I don't know if I desired past 50. I'm not sure how that works, but I was kind of excited, hit this. And I think it also came together for me. A bunch of things in my life feel settled. So snuck up, but I had the eye on that target. So maybe happy I got here too.
Couple checks.
Yeah, exactly.
So the gist of this show, it's kind of like a giant origin story. I like the guests to kind of go back as far as they want to go, where they grew up, how they grew up, parents, siblings, work, school, and then we kind of weave our way to where you are today. So
sounds good.
Yeah, just talk about all the different versions of you, over the years. So walk this thing back as far as you want to go. Yeah,
for sure. So I've lived in Calgary since 1985, but I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I moved from Winnipeg at the age of 9. So it's interesting with my background, my family history and background. Winnipeg's an interesting place. My mother's Métis, so we're definitely from the Métis homeland. With the last name Delorme, it's definitely from that region of Canada. Definitely most people would think of you as being Métis from that region. Just a lot of things that I think were made it being unique growing up there, yet if anyone said, well, what's your home? I would describe Calgary as home. Just having been here for this long, I think what Calgary maybe feels like to myself and to my mother, and maybe what it meant to leave Winnipeg for new horizons or new opportunities. And I think it dovetails really well with my background and what that means in Canada. So, so I think that I know a lot of people, I've had the opportunity to being an entrepreneur for 33 years now. I've got to know a lot of people, been able to build relationships with a lot of people. But for people who don't know sort of my origin story, I think starting from the beginning maybe would explain maybe why I am who I am and why I approach life the way I do. So I was born to a Métis mother and a Trinidadian father. My mother on her side, her father was 73 years old. He was the Métis side for her. He was 73 years old when he fathered her. So she had this very interesting upbringing. And I won't talk about her story. It's not my story to tell. But she had a Métis father, an Ukrainian mother, and grew up in a period of time where that was not advantageous, I guess, to grow up in that type of environment. Grew up in a rural community. She ended up meeting my father in like 18, 19 years old. He was born in Trinidad. My grandparents, his parents, immigrated to Regina in the would have been like the early 60s. Yeah. Although they had their children in Trinidad, Tobago, they're actually Bajan people. So they're actually from Barbados. So our family, that side of the families were really Bajan people. So interesting, right? To have, a black man marry an Indigenous woman at a period of time where it wasn't advantageous to be a minority in any sense of the word, let alone to come together and have a child, a mixed race child in 1976. But I think for as difficult as maybe a time that was, in a very multicultural city, but with a lot of divisions, it's a very divisive city, even to this day. I just feel incredibly blessed that I've got all of these different backgrounds, because that truly is at the core of why I am who I am. And it was something that was very difficult to navigate as a child and as a teenager, somewhat as a young adult. But you start to realize, maybe the resilience that comes out of that, physically and emotionally, mentally. So that I think that's sort of really the beginning of who I am and where I came from. And it moving to Alberta and Calgary specifically was not it wasn't an easy transition, but not something I could articulate at the time. It wasn't until I was in my 20s where I could probably had a better understanding of what that meant to have that kind of change. That's definitely sort of the beginning of things. So if you want to know something specific, it's probably best to ask.
As a youngster, 0 to 9, living in Winnipeg, what was going on? Were your interests, were you like athletic? Were you creative? Was it school? Was it friends? Like what kind of had your interest back then? Or maybe it was none of the above?
Yeah, I was a curious kid. always asking questions. I think I was uncertain of who I was, and probably because my father wasn't around from the age of almost 2. We didn't have money, so my mother is very successful today. Always worked hard, was working towards her success, but came from beginnings that were simple. And she was trying to find herself a young person with a young child, but I didn't know everything about myself, and probably elements of it that my mom didn't know everything about her origins either. So there were things that I didn't know, right? Or maybe I just didn't instinctively understand. So I was curious. I asked a lot of questions. I was always interested. I remember driving along the road one day, and I'm looking at a car driving by, and I can barely see over the edge of the door edge through the window, and I can see that the wheels spinning look like they're going backwards. And I'm asking my mom, I'm like, well, Mom, why do they look like they're going backwards? And I think I caught her off guard, and she's like, I think you should ask your uncle. So always asking questions, but I also was always getting into trouble. And that was a period of time in my life just up to moving to Calgary where I probably was a bit of a bully. I don't know why. I'm not sure what that's about, but I definitely was a bully. I liked people, I liked being around them, but I think maybe not understanding who I was, maybe was part of it. I think there was maybe an element of it that I already knew I was different. And it was funny because without understanding who I was, and there's an element of that I can explain later, but I found myself with other kids who were also different. So my friends' names were Gunther. Gunther was from Chile, and he was born in Chile. So Gunther at that age, and his brother Andrew, they understood political discord because they had just gone through it. That's why they were in Winnipeg in Canada. So they were talking about stuff, but I didn't understand what they were talking about. But they were judging me for the plums that I was eating at school, and they said, I can't remember which were which, but the red plums were different than the purple plums, and the dictator sold or liked a certain kind of plum, so those are the ones were the bad plums. Right? Really interesting when you're 6 years old and you don't know anything, right? So, and then there was Morgan and Megan, and they were came from a mixed family. Morgan was Caucasian, but Megan was Indigenous. He was First Nations. And there were other kids, but those are the ones that stood out. And and there was Danny. Danny's father was caught robbing banks, made a fortune robbing banks. They never got any of the money. So he wrote a book. I had an interesting group of friends. But they, it was interesting that I found this motley crew of individuals, but I would say a motley crew from a creed standpoint. Like everybody came from a different place. Yep. And maybe that was a part of me realizing that I came from all these different cultures and backgrounds, but I could never have explained that at the time, but I definitely didn't find that one group that was just me, because there really wasn't. So I think somehow through that, I was a bit of a bully, maybe trying to find my place. I always, as a child, I was always generally good at things that I tried. Good memory. If I tried a sport, by the time I was done, I could play it pretty well, within a day. Or if I played a game, I could always win the game by the end of the day or the end of the time we were playing. So I think things sort of came easily to me without me understanding maybe how to become excellent at anything. So, so I was good. I was an only child. So I grew up as an only child. I'm used to spending a lot of time alone. Even when my mom and I were together, we would still spend time alone. I talked in my sleep as a very young child, right up into my mid-20s. And my mom, I think I was like 3 or 4, she had to put me in the basement because she couldn't sleep, right? Because I was too loud. So it kind of odd, right? To have a young kid in a basement, but it wasn't odd for me. So yeah, it was interesting. And I grew up in a part of, in Winnipeg, there's Portage Avenue that comes out of downtown.
Yep.
And there's a park as you're driving out of downtown on your left-hand side called Vimy Ridge Park. And off of Vimy Ridge Park, there's a church with this beautiful limestone facade. And across the street is the rectory house. And that's what we lived on the main floor of it. Beautiful house, but in a part of downtown Winnipeg that was kind of rough. But as a kid, I didn't know that. This was just all normal stuff. So yeah, I spent time with my friends, playing and things of that nature. And I don't know if there was the one thing that I would say it's what I was interested in, other than maybe just learning in general. I was just very interested in knowing lots of different things, and it's a thing that I still do today. So yeah.
Single child with your mom, you and your mom, did she, like those early years, did she like sit you down, educate you in anything? Were you watching her work? Were you watching her keep it together? Like what that relationship look like early days?
She didn't teach me anything about the way the world looked or the way the world judged. She purposely chose not to do that. I didn't know that till I was 18 though. Like at all. Like I felt incredibly naive when I figured it out. What my mom did, we were growing up together.
Yeah.
So the only thing I'll say about my mom in terms of her background is she grew up in the foster care system from the age of 10 on. So, I think for her, she was seeking family, so creating your own is one way of doing it. And we were a team. So ended up with this, just an amazing person. So she was growing up, and I think for her, she realized that working hard and education and, doing the most that you possibly could was the way to ensure sustainability in your future and probably maybe her own idea of sovereignty without thinking about it from an Indigenous lens, right? Just being able to create your own future. So the one thing that was a constant from the youngest I can remember, which is probably about 2 years old, to today, is my mom would talk to me about her career. I always knew what she did for a living. I knew what her job description was. I knew the company she worked for, what service or product that they sold. She wasn't using the term glass ceiling or feminism or anything like that, but I knew all of those concepts from a very young age. She worked at MTS, so that was the Manitoba telephone systems, which was comparable to AGT, Alberta Government Telephone Systems, before we moved to Alberta, and she was bringing home technology. Right. So she was just using the term yesterday. I can't remember what it's called now, but it's like a 40-pound machine, which was the beginning of email. right?
Crazy.
So it was really like an intranet system where you would dial on the phone, and as soon as you started hearing like kind of like that fax type sound, you would take it and you put the phone into these cup holders, and then you could type a message, right? Which must have been very difficult to explain to someone why this was better than just talking on the phone.
Yeah, totally.
You know, but she was bringing home stuff like that. And, you know, to better herself, you know, she didn't have money, and, you know, opportunities were not as abundant back then as they are for, you know, people trying to better themselves today. No like granting type systems. She was taking herself to Toastmasters and learning how to public speak, and she obviously was good at it. She's an amazing speaker, but you know, I remember her bringing home awards and things of that nature. So a lot of our conversations over, you know, 48 years has been around professional approaches, or seeking success, you know, how to conduct yourself in a professional environment, you know, understanding the dynamics of the professional environment. You know, I think people see us together, they know who we are, and, you know, because we're business partners, you know, it's either, oh, you're Marie's son, or, oh, you're Colby's mom. You know, it's a really unique relationship. And I've heard some girlfriends in the past, or, you know, people maybe who I just first started dating, use a thing saying, oh, you're mama's boy. And I'm like, oh, no, not at all. Like, it's not that kind of relationship. We've got this, probably what is closer to a friendship, but built on this very professional base, that our conversations are not like family level conversations, or they're not normal family conversations. They are our type of family conversations. And when we're together, you know, we're talking about political things, you know, socio-cultural conversations, things that are, you know, I don't know. They're just really interesting conversations. And as a baby, my mom, you know, she didn't talk to me like a child. You know, I felt like an equal from a very early age, and it didn't serve our relationship very well when I was a teenager, though. I think she was kicking herself at that point for ever letting me feel like I was an equal.
Caught up to her.
Yeah, exactly.
When you know you're about to move from Winnipeg to Calgary, that kind of point in your life, kind of what's happening, what does that transition to Calgary look like?
Tough.
Yeah.
So what I didn't know about Winnipeg was that it was a very multicultural place. I didn't realize that. For anybody who's never been to Winnipeg or doesn't know about the culture of Winnipeg, it is a place that has had every different creed under the sun in the city since time immemorial. Like, it's a very unique place, and it is quite equal in its representation of all these different backgrounds, right? It's probably one of the largest urban centers for Indigenous people. It's a huge center for Black people, you know, all the different Asian communities. But even when I was a child, if you went out to eat, and I remember this, we would, there was a thing called Folklorama, and Folklorama was, it was sort of like going to the Taste of Banff or whatever, where you have all these different tastings. Well, what they did is they had these cultural experiences that you'd buy a passport for. So you could go to, you know, the Ukrainian community club, and there'd be dancing there and Ukrainian food and whatever. It was all there. Well, this thing lasted however long it runs for, but all these different things were going on. And back then, you know, Jamaican and Trinidadian, everybody was having their own little folklorama. So as a child, you know, I was exposed to all these different flavors of food and these different cultures, but I didn't realize they were different cultures. I didn't know know that there were these silos or these segregations of people and cultures. When I moved to Calgary, it was something I couldn't put my finger on, but I knew it. So I come to Calgary. I had been going to a French immersion school right up to grade 3 when I left Winnipeg. Come to Calgary to finish grade 3. I've never been in a French immersion school where French is now just a class. And you don't take everything in French. When I was in French immersion in Winnipeg, English was the class. And I spoke English. That's all that we spoke. But in school, I took math in French, and I took all the classes that, as an elementary student in French. So I came here, and it was odd because I don't know that even with math being my strongest course, I had a problem in math class. Okay, now we're doing division, or now we're doing multiplication, or whatever it was. Everything was foreign. And for me, the greatest battle was realizing that I was not strong enough in English. And I could speak English. I could converse, I could do all those things, but if you asked me to spell, or to read, it was weak, and it was incredibly weak, and it was really tough because it puts you into a position of coming across like you're lacking intelligence, but it's not a lack of intelligence. It's a lack of understanding, and it's being taught in a different model. And I had, if I spoke French, I had a French accent. I didn't have that accent speaking English, but I even sounded different than the other kids in French school, right? And the teachers knew immediately. The way I spoke was quite different. Yeah. I was more bilingual, right? So that was difficult, and I failed grade 3 when I came here, and it was just painful. It was a painful time, and I thought it was all about education, but I think what I was actually feeling was I was looking around. Nothing felt familiar. I would have been one of the only multicultural students in the school. I went to high school at Lord Beaverbrook. So at the time, that was 2,700 students in high school, and there were like 3 black kids. And I don't think I really saw myself as being black or Indigenous, but it was abundantly clear that there were hardly any students, and that's like 94. Yeah, man. Right? So this is not that long ago. So in grade 3, we've moved to Calgary. Moved to Calgary with my mom's boyfriend. That was different because we've not really ever had a guy living in we'd never had a guy living in our house. So that was really difficult. This fellow, though, had enough patience to teach me English, but he didn't have empathy. So, a harsh approach to education doesn't work for anybody. It worked for me, but not in a joyful way. Yeah. But that summer, all I did was English. They put me into grade 4. So I don't know if the school agreed to it or they just did it. All of grade 4 was a struggle. I liked the school that I was at, but it was a struggle because everything came down to English. How do I learn how to read and write in English effectively? And it's so weird because you can speak it. Yeah. And I was articulate. Even as a child, I was fairly articulate. But it was painful. And I always remember if I would look at the word, or if I had to spell the word of, my natural inclination is OV. To me, that's what it sounds like. And it was so funny because, and I'm still to this day, if I have to think about what I write, that's a struggle. If I just let it happen, you just naturally write properly. So it was tough. And it was one of those things that probably became the first thing in my life and the longest standing thing in my life, where you get this, you have this belief and understanding that I'm just not good at that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a tough thing as a child, you know, to realize that, man, this is a struggle. And it wasn't due to intelligence. And I write a lot now. But even if I explain to people today, yeah, it's not my strength, but I'm probably a better writer than 80% of most people. I write a lot. We have to for our work. And I had to work really hard at it. So that was difficult. It was the first time in my life that I didn't know it at the time, but I knew the feeling, probably where I started to experience racism. I probably did in Winnipeg too, but I just think it was a different kind of environment. In Calgary, I think it was more evident because there was just so little, right? So little in terms of diversity in Calgary. So that, age 9 to 18, I would say they were challenging years, but I also started finding myself and I started experiencing success. And I think for me, that's what Calgary means. Like I would think of it as a place of opportunity, a place where pedigree does not get in the way of success, yet Calgary's pedigree is the thing that probably makes people feel the least welcome in this environment. So it was a very interesting time to move, and I didn't have my clan, it was interesting.
Those are big years, obviously 9 to 18. But you started to become successful. You're dealing with like racism. Like there's a lot going on. How do you handle it at that age? Trying to figure out your own stuff. You're trying to fit in. You're trying to there's a lot going on. How do you weave through it? Yeah,
so there's a number of things. I got very good at saying "fuck you." that was probably the go-to. I probably dealt with it the most, just trying to be the best at things. I was supposed to go to a junior high called David Thompson. I grew up in Acadia. I went to Andrew Davidson, and then right across the field was David Thompson, and those were just like 2 blocks away from my mom's house. And my mom told me, "You're going to R.T. Alderman." All my friends were going to David Thompson, and I'm like, what? Like my mom wasn't someone you argued with. So, I don't think I understood why or what was happening, but she said to me, "I think there's better opportunities for you." So this is kind of like being on the other side of the train tracks. So, R.T. Alderman is in Willow Park, it's in Maple Ridge, but Maple Ridge, Willow Park, and then Bonavista, right? So so I go there. I still remember my first day. I had to walk quite a ways to get there. It wasn't like crazy, but it was a walk. I don't know anyone. Well, I did know a kid. I just didn't know he had moved and he was going there too. He was a black kid too. I'm sitting at the front doors. I don't know anyone. I'm there early. And my mom had taken me to Walmart or to Woolco to buy new clothes. And, I was allowed to pick my own clothes. I picked a green pair of rugby pants, a salmon colored, kind of like a golf shirt, and high top bullet shoes.
Going for it, hey?
Fantastic. And an afro. A fairly large afro. Yeah. So I'm sitting at the front door and I'm watching kids walk in and I'm like, oh, wow, something's different. I'm watching. And I still remember the one thing that I saw, and I realized from this that it was quite different. And I think it was Roe who he went to Andrew Davidson for a short period of time, and he was going to RT Alderman as well. And Roe walked by, and he was a tall black kid and good at basketball, good at all sports. But he walked by and he had Air Jordans on. I'd never seen Air Jordans
Fancy.
before, but back then that's major,
Yeah.
right? So he's got Air Jordans, and I'm like, oh man, I've never seen those before. But I knew immediately that there was something different. So finally I go into the school, and because of my name, last name being Delorme, they put you into home rooms that are based on, what beginning of your initial. So I'm in the first row of homeroom, and I'm like 5 or 6 students back, and the teacher is going, okay, David so-and-so, and Mike so-and-so, and Jane so-and-so, gets to my name, and they're like, Colby, and didn't really pronounce it, and then like kind of stumbling through Delorme, and this is me, this is how naive I was. I looked the way I looked, dressed the way I'm dressed, and I'm like, Colby, like the cheese. Fucking brutal. So as you can imagine, for 6 years, there are some kids that all heard, hey, cheese, just brutal. So this is the beginning of it, right? Mm-hmm. And part of what I think when I started to realize that there were people who had money and there's people who didn't have money, I attributed almost everything up to the age of 18 or maybe 20, no, up to 18, that this was about financial position or class. That's what I thought it was. And, by the time, we go through RT Alderman, and all of us ended up going to Lord Beaverbrook, and my friends, right, from David Thompson, we all ended up back together. Yep. I thought that's where the division was. But in junior high, we had, I think what my mom realized was that there was this opportunity there. I was going to be with a different class of people. Yeah. There were far more kids there who came from families with more money, or maybe the parents were older so that they were more established. They were further along in their careers. I don't think there was a ton of wealthy people, but just people who were further along. But I think maybe from an education standpoint and what you should be trying to strive for was far more embedded in RT Alderman. One of the individuals, I think all the teachers I had, they were good people. But we had one gym teacher named Mr. Banks. Mr. Banks, he was a great guy, not a really tall guy, like ultra fit, really fit. But the way he started gym class was running the mile run. Wow. Now, the way like at RT Alderman, the way we interpreted things, or I think a lot of us did, was you did not want to be stupid and you did not want to be good at sports. You wanted to be good at everything. So when I did the mile run, I was always trying, to be first in. But we had a couple swimmers in our class, and a fellow named Dave Gorby, always a nice guy. Dave, like, I don't know, in the mile run, he was under 5 minutes.
Just whipping.
Yeah, fast. It was a couple times I got almost right to 5 minutes. I was usually always within 5 or 10 seconds of that. Yep. But those guys are coming in for something, 450, 452, whatever. And, there were some kids who didn't care about running, but very few. Like, this was a point to prove you were better than other people, right? It was competitive. So there was that. You did not want to not do well in school. So I started dealing, to get back to your question, I started dealing with all these things by as long as I'm good at something, that I could at least hang my hat on that, and I could keep myself unique in certain ways. Mr. Banks, they were always teaching us, the right ways to do things. So when we were being taught to run, back then, you taught the ABCs. So high kicks, high knees and kick. Like C was like a pawing at the ground, right? When you learn how to run properly, you can really improve. So we did very well. We just did well at all of those things, and I loved it. I loved all of that stuff. I liked learning, and I liked doing sports and, running fast and all that stuff. So we put a lot into that. And I remember Mr. Banks one day telling us, because he was teaching us how to weightlift. We would do sit-up competitions, push-up competitions, and like in grade 9, how many push-ups or sit-ups could you do in a minute? I think I was like 63 or 66 push-ups, and I can't remember what the sit-ups were. But either way, it was a lot back then. There were some kids who could do more. But we were being taught to do this. And I remember him saying to us, well, if you want to get better at this, when you're watching TV at home, during the commercials, do sit-ups and do push-ups, right? It's an interesting thing to talk to a grade 8 or grade 9 student about. He was talking about excellence and giving you tools of how to get there. I think we were incredibly lucky to have that individual at that period of time, because he was instilling something without actually telling us, so if you want to do better in life, do X, right? Always practice. He didn't say it that way. He just said, hey, you want to do better at push-ups for this competition that we're going to do once a week or once a month? Here's one way to do it. So that, I think, started me off in this place of wanting to do well at something, right? And I learned, and I've learned in my life, that I don't think I'm an expert at anything, but I'm above average in a lot of things. So, and I love that. I love learning about something new and figuring out how to do it. So it's been great to be an entrepreneur and having that skill or having that desire, maybe. So all through junior high and especially into high school, everything that I was doing was, I was going to I played football, rugby, tons of weightlifting. I was drafting was my thing. I thought I was going to be an architect. So all of those things, especially the drafting, I wanted to be number one. But if I was going to play on a team, I definitely wanted to be first string or first team. So always doing that. Played hockey, baseball. Played everything. So yeah, I think that's how. Whether I was dealing with something or not, that's what I was using as a way to say, no, I belong because I'm here in the pecking order. Like in high school, my best friend was a fellow named David Pargeter, and David in grade 10 made the senior football team. David could bench press 330 pounds in grade 10.
Monster.
Yeah. And, I can't remember exactly what I was in grade 10, but, I was over 200 pounds in the bench press then. And by grade 11, like David was always number one. Ever since we entered high school, he was always number one in bench press. But by grade 11, I was in the top 10. Now, that's a lot of kids, and you're competing against grade 12 students, right? So for me, I'm like, oh, that means something, right? So I think that's what I was always doing, in order to kind of deal with the things I didn't understand.
Yeah. Did you, that's an interesting example. Do you remember yourself like creating these goals in your head? I want to be in the top 10, or no. Was it just like, I need to do the best I can. I need to perform. I need to stand out. I need to just like...
Yeah, it was, my mom had really high expectations. They were there for educational pursuits, but I don't remember her saying, well, you should have an A. I don't think she ever took that approach, that you hear some kids talk about or some adults say, but she had high expectations. If I had responsibilities, I was to get them done. If I didn't do them, there were consequences. Or if I got in trouble, there were consequences, right? So I was very clear on those types of things, and I pushed the limits everywhere and for a very long time, right up to 18, I pushed the limits. But what was very clear to me from my mom is that you've got to, you should do well. Right. And I was watching her work hard, right? When I was 14, 15 years old, half of her staff, was in Edmonton. So she would leave at 6 a.m, fly up to Edmonton, work with her staff, and then come home, and fly back and, be home by 7. And when internet started getting going and the intranet was really more the thing that happened in corporations and email and stuff. She'd come home, she'd get to the kitchen table, she'd unpack I remember she had a ThinkPad, she unpacked that and she started working, and she was just that person. So I always saw someone who had worked hard and when we got to Alberta, it was fantastic for her from a success standpoint, right? She was moving fast and being acknowledged for her work. Not that she wasn't dealing with, glass ceiling stuff and issues of that nature, but, she was always pushing and forging ahead. So I think it was maybe through witnessing what she was doing. And then also, like, if I saw disappointment in her face, that was way worse than anything, that I could have, getting in trouble or anything. It was more the disappointment, right? So, and I think I just enjoyed, they talk about love languages or whatever. I'm definitely that person, words of affirmation, that those are definitely things that resonate with me. They were, my mom as a kid from the youngest age, and I don't know, probably 5 or 6 is when I first remember it, because I grew up as a single child and my mom was so young, so I'm 6, she's only 26, right? So if she had people over or if she was invited somewhere, I had to be there. She couldn't afford a babysitter, so I went everywhere. So as long as you're okay with Colby coming, I can come. So I hung out with adults. And I hung out with adults most of my life. So I still have friends who they're mid 60s, late 60s, 70s. They're very close friends to me. So I would hang out, and I think because of the way my mom talked to me, I'd meet people and say, oh, how was your day? Well, that's odd for a 5-year-old to ask you how your day was. Or I'd ask, well, what do you do? They would tell me, and I'd say, so what is that? I wanted the detail. So, I was forging relationships, but I was doing it more like a little adult, more than a child. And I was only exposed to them. So I wasn't having a ton of like play date type engagements. So that's people I got to know. So I think that probably started shaping what it was and or sort of maybe what I was seeking. And when those times are over, whether we left someone's house or we were done a weekend with some of her friends or work colleagues, my mom would always tell me, oh, Bill and his wife said, how smart you were, how intelligent you were, how much they enjoyed you being there. So for me, even to this day, if someone were to make a comment, that means more to me than anything else. And I can remember just as a kid doing that. And my mom still does that, right? Like she'll still tell me, oh, so-and-so said this or whatever. It's interesting, right? We become children, our younger selves or our inner child, I guess, never leaves us. It's still the thing that probably dictates the way we feel the majority of the time.
For sure. Coming out of high school, you've talked about this year being the year of 18. Sounds like there was something there. Coming out of high school, you're 18 when you graduate?
Yeah.
So do you have a plan coming out of high school? Are you like, you're achieving things, you're good at things. Like, do you have an idea what's going to happen after?
I had an idea all from grade 10. From grade 10 on, right through grade 12, I'm going to be an architect. I'm going to obviously go to architectural school.
Yep.
This is the path that I'm going to take. And, there's no other option. And it wasn't me making a statement that there's no other option. I just was not thinking of anything else, right? I think it's the same as the child or the teenager says, well, I'm going to become a police officer. And they're not dreaming of becoming a firefighter in case that doesn't work, right? They're only thinking this one thing. So I thought that's what I was going to do. I was very successful in school, in drafting class. I had already been building houses by the time I was in grade 12 at becoming 18. And there were just things I understood about it. There's probably that one thing that everybody's like, that's the one thing I'm really good at.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not a professional guitar player, but it's a thing I really understand. That's how I felt about drafting. Unfortunately, I also liked pot. So, and it was interesting. I think is one of those things at that time in my life. I don't think I was ever like an escapism type of person. I'm not that kind of person. I like music, and I like music, or I like movies or TV shows to sort of escape, more to slow my mind down. But I was never one who wanted to sort of escape life. I'm more like a head-on kind of person. Okay, I got a problem, I got to deal with this. But I think I really enjoyed seeing the world in a different way, more of that curiosity that I always had, or I have always had. And that was something where there's a cause and effect to that. And for me, in grade 11 and 12, one of the things I started doing more to deal with wanting to smoke pot was I started selling. And, it's these things you do, right? When you're a kid, I knew there's consequences, but you don't really think about consequences. But this one had consequences. And I had, from the age of 12 on, I was once a year, the police would bring me home for something.
You're consistent.
And I did it between January 1st and March 23rd, my birthday, every year. My mom hated that time of year. I didn't have a birthday party after the age of 12 because I got in trouble every single year in between that period of time. And there were consequences. And one of the things was no birthday. So no birthday party, right? Mom always made sure I had a birthday. But, I got into trouble. And unfortunately, in grade 12, that was me getting kicked out of school. And, for me, it was the beginning of not completing things. I knew right from wrong. And I'm my own worst critic in anything that I do. But it was the one time that I knew for a fact I was being treated unfairly. So when I got kicked out of school, I had a pretty good average. I'd already finished in grade 11. I finished physics 30. I think I had finished bio 30. All of grade 12, I had designed it so I could take, I had 9 or 12 classes of drafting a week.
Wow. Right.
So it was the majority of my classes. But a fellow in school I had sold pot to outside of school, but he got caught with it in school. He told them who it was, so we both get kicked out of school. And I still remember, being in the principal's office, and Beaverbrook was big enough. I think there were 3 or 4 principals, right? So they took, initials. I take A to E and you're, whatever. So I'd never even met the principal. I didn't even know that was the principal, my principal. And Constable Sands was in the room. We were a big enough school that we had our own, our own police officer. And he was my rugby coach. And we're in there and saying, well, so-and-so said this. And I used the term and I said, well, that's his word against mine. I did not sell him that pot at school. Didn't say I did it, but I said not at school. And they just said, it doesn't matter. We have a zero tolerance. And I just knew it was wrong. And, something's off and bad when you got your teachers coming into, they must have known, but I had teachers coming into the principal's office and some of them were in tears. I was in tears. And, I just realized that it was a period of time where like I'd done something that was actually going to have measurable impact. And my mom was in the principal's office, and for her, I don't know if you can ever judge the way someone's going to parent or the way someone's going to do something, but she took a zero tolerance approach too and said, well, she knew what I was like. She knew I pushed the limits. But this wasn't a time she was going to defend me. And I don't know what I would do as a parent, but I think that was maybe a time where I needed to be defended on the rules so that I wasn't kicked out. But I think everything is by design. It was meant to happen. So I've got no ill will to my mom, but I get kicked out of school and I have to go to Wisewood for my last 3 months or 4 months. But I was naive enough, juvenile enough to take an approach that they fucked me and that's it. Like I approached school the right way. I was working hard. I didn't do this stuff at school. I'm not wrong. So that's it. So I kind of give up on it. I'd never skipped school up until that point. I go to Wisewood, definitely an environment. It wasn't really for me. I joined the rugby team. I did well on the rugby team. I was in drafting class, but they use AutoCAD. It wasn't pen. That was very different. I'd never used AutoCAD. Yep. They wouldn't let me finish the CMHC drafting competition that I had started. Even my drafting teachers, Mr. Weinstock and Mr. McDonald, fought for me. They wouldn't do it. I was a kid who got kicked out of school for pot, and that's all there was to it. So when I said this became the beginning of me not finishing things, and there's not much in my life I haven't finished, but there's definitely became it. Then I didn't finish high school. And for someone who loves learning and, loves to do well at things, that's a massive, that's just something, the idea of that is incomprehensible. Yep. And not going to university is incomprehensible. But I didn't. So I lose my ability to compete this drafting competition. And in class, there was a fellow there, I think his last name was Graham. His father was an architect, so he's in the class. He's good at what he did. I think there were elements of what we did in class. I think I was better suited. I think I did really well at it. I think I was the top student. He wins the competition. I just nearly died inside. I go to see Mr. Weinstock and Mr. McDonald, and I'm holding the news article. I can't remember how I found it or saw it. And they were just, even in their eyes, they were heartbroken for me. And then, I don't like school. I figure I've been screwed. I didn't live at home for a month and a half. I didn't want to follow my mom's rules. So that was really tough. We'd always been together. And, I ended up getting back, but that was tough. Like, I showed up at the house, and Mom says, "What are you doing there?" I says, "Well, I wanted to grab some clothes," and she said, "Book an appointment and close the door." I'm like, "Wow, okay."
Here we are.
So I book an appointment, and she doesn't let me in the house. She grabs some of my stuff in a garbage bag and puts it outside the door. I'm like, okay. A few weeks later, I call her to book an appointment because I want to talk. So, I'm sitting in her living room, and she has this big living room and a couch on one end, couch on the other, and she sits down and she's just looking at me, right? And she says, I don't know what to say, and I usually am not at a loss for words. And she says, "Well, like, what is it that you want?" I'm like, I was thinking that, maybe I would come back home. I'm 18, right, at this point. And the reason why I wasn't there is because she said, "Well, you're grounded, and you just got kicked out of school, whatever." And I said, "Well, I turned 18 in 2 weeks." And she goes, "Oh, you're 18. Like, you don't follow the rules. You can be on your own, right?" And so we have this conversation, and she goes, "Okay." And she goes, "Well, I want to know what you've learned." I wasn't expecting that question. I think I was probably expecting to go, "Oh, thank God you're coming home."
He's back.
No, it's all what happened. And my answer, and I was really truthful, and I said, "I learned I can run a business, and I know that people trust me." And my mom looks at me and goes, "That's not what I fucking meant." And my mom doesn't swear, right? I'm like, okay. So now I've got a thing, so I'm sure, I was a smart kid. So I'm sure I, was honest and open, and I like living here, and, everything. And, you give me opportunity and whatnot. But it was really tough. And so I don't finish high school. I have enough credits, but I don't have the required courses. And the issue with that was that I think at the time Beaverbrook was the only non-semestered school.
Right.
So when you were in Beaverbrook, when you started English, you took it all year, right? You didn't just take it for the first half or the second half, first semester, second semester. So that was tough. And my mom didn't go to university, but at this point she was in university. So, or she had just finished her BA. So, and she was a director at TELUS, very successful, on her way to being an AVP at TELUS. Like, she did very well in that telecommunications company. And I had to think about what I was going to do. And, my mom was always something, and is still someone who sponsors people, right? Back then, I don't think we didn't use that kind of terminology, but it's exactly what she has done her entire life. Regardless of what she had or where she came from, she was always helped to steward and people along their way if she can or if they wanted. So I said, well, I need to get a job. And I had worked every summer. I always worked hard, built houses. I think I created a handyman company one summer because I couldn't find a job. And I do work for other TELUS people that worked for my mom, painting fences or, doing whatever. So that summer, I built houses for Dan-Can in Cochrane. That summer I was 17, I built houses for Dan-Can. So, I didn't have a vehicle, and I finished school, and my mom said, well, I'll see if anybody has jobs. And I ended up getting a job building or cleaning windows for the husband of a woman that worked for my mom. It was not a difficult job. I was 18. I had a driver's license, no vehicle, and actually, I didn't have a vehicle because I did have a vehicle at 18 when I was building houses for Dan Cannon. I got into a car accident. And I got into another car accident 6 weeks later. And I said, okay, no more cars. I got to pay off these cars. So I ended up cleaning these windows. Well, I was applying in this business like sales strategies and really like CSR styled approaches to working with the clients. And in a 6-month period, I got the business. And I thought, oh, you could do way better in this business. I asked him for a raise. And when I had started the job with him, he had said, well, why do you think this is a good fit for you? And I said, well, I'm good at what I do. I learn things really quickly. And I figure I said, how many employees do you have? He said, I have 2. They're my brother-in-laws. I said, okay. I said, well, I think in 2 weeks you could fire them because I'll pick up the slack. He looks at me, I'm sure he just thought I was an asshole. Yeah, totally. And he's like, he looks at me and goes, whatever. So he teaches me how to clean windows in his house, right? So I'm cleaning windows. It's not difficult. And he shows me the different things he had to do. 10 days later, he fired them. I picked up the slack. I could do what the 2 of them could do by myself in 1 day. So the 6 months, I go through 6 months, and so I'm still 18, and I asked him for a raise. And I was making $10 an hour. And he said, well, what do you want? And I think I asked for 15. And he said, I'll pay you 12 and don't ever ask me for another raise. And at that moment, I just thought, well, okay, well, that doesn't work. I knew what I was making him. He told me, so I asked him after Christmas. He told me, with me working for him, he made an additional $97,000 that year over the year before. And I had been raising his rates for him. I was doing all sorts of shit. He goes, okay, that house is not enough. I got them confirmed for next year, and it's $80 a house, not $40, right? I was doing stuff like that. And I was honest, just worked hard. And he takes me, him and his wife took me to the Keg. And so steak dinner. And I said, I'm going to go to the washroom. I had to go to the washroom. And he follows me in there. And I'm at the urinal. He's at the urinal. I go to wash my hands, and he says, Colby, thank you so much for this year. And that's when he tells me, he's made $97,000 more than the year before. And he gives me a roll of cash, like it's about 1.5 inches thick. And I'm like, oh, wow. So I don't look at it, I've been taught, you just whatever. So I go home. And I open up this wad of cash. This fucking asshole gave me a wad of cash of ones. He gave me $167 was the bonus. And I don't even think it was 167. It was the fact that it was ones. Like, just give me $100 bill, a 50, a 10, and a 1, or whatever the hell it was.
The illusion.
Yeah. And I'm like, and I don't think I could have articulated what he actually did, but I'm like, well, this was just wrong. And it was that moment. And then I asked him for the raise, wouldn't give me the raise, or he gave me $2. And I thought, well, $2, and I did the math. Yeah. I'm like, well, that's nothing. Like, that doesn't even cut into, the extra that he's making. I thought, okay, well, I'm going to start my own company. So that's all I did. I just planned to start my own company. Now, what's difficult is that, there was an expectation that I was going to university, not only from my mom, but myself. And I was making a choice that, well, that's off the table. I haven't finished high school. You don't go and start a company at 18. You go and get education and you create a professional career for yourself. So I had to really think through all of this stuff, but it just seemed like the right thing. And I do believe when I made that comment to my mom, I've learned that I can run a business and people trust me. It was the thing that I learned. And it's because when I would sell a gram of pot to some kid, they'd say, no, I wanted a gram. I said, yeah, that's what a real gram looks like. You know, I was honest. You know, that to me, that was just, you know, is sort of bred in. And I don't know if it has something to do with us being Métis. We're just entrepreneurial people. It's just something that's very unique to Métis people. So, and Indigenous people for that matter. But, you know, so I start this company and I don't think my mom's happy, you know, but I'm like, if I set my mind to something, I'm going to do it. So, but she didn't stop me and she found ways to help me. So she comes home one day. My mom has a 3-story walk-up, still in the same house that we moved to Calgary and moved into. And so she got these, you know, 4 steps to get up into the living room from the front door. And I've got all this stuff. I have business cards. I have like little greeting cards that has a business card slot in it. I've designed a logo. I've got work shirts. I've got my logo on the work shirts. I've sewn the logo on. I've got, you know, like khaki pants. My mom and my uncle both lent me a few $1,000s. So I bought a truck, I bought ladders, rags, you know, squeegees, all this stuff. And my mom comes home and, you know, I think she knows I'm working on things, but she hasn't seen or doesn't really know everything that I've done. And so I'm proud, right? I've ordered business cards and they've arrived and I've got these greeting cards and it's got my logo big on the front. And when you open it, there's this verbiage on the top right before the business card slot. And it says, Codell and crew would like to thank you for your business, right? So I got my business card and I got a cell phone, you know, 18, got a cell phone. That number is the same number I have today. And, you know, so I got all this stuff and my mom comes in and she's sitting on, she says, well, show me. And so I show her all this stuff and she's looking and I can see she has tears in her eyes. And I think she just realized, oh no, this guy's serious. And I could just see pride. So it was good, right? And she helped me. She introduced me. There was the division that she ran in TELUS at the time was called Carrier Services. It was the most profitable division based on the size of it in the company. I think they did $200 million a year. She was a cleanup person. She went into divisions that weren't working. She fixed them, turned them over. She's very good at what she does. So she said, well, do you know what telemarketing is? I said, no. And it was okay. Well, there's this guy that we deal with. He owns Good Guy Cellular, and he's got a telecommunications company. I said, you should talk to him. So she introduced me to him. I go meet him. He brings me into one of his boardrooms, and he explains to me about telemarketing. And he says, do you know how telemarketing works? I said, no. And he says, well, you pay us for X number of calls per hour per person. He said, so my people can do about 100 calls an hour. And he said, of 100 an hour, we can get you 1 to 2.5 sales per hour. And I thought, wow, that's not very good. And he says, well, I said, well, is that good? He goes, yeah, it's really good. If you get a 2.5% return, you are doing anywhere between 1 and 2.5% return, you're doing exceptionally well. I said, okay. So explains it to me. He says, so put it this way. He says, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go put a bold sign at the beginning of a neighborhood. You're then, a day later, you are going to, either yourself or you're going to hire people, are going to walk through that neighborhood and you're going to put door knockers on every door for window cleaning. And then a day later, we're going to call. And he said, by the time people hear our phone call, some people are going to believe that they've always heard of Codell Window Cleaning and that they're a great window cleaning company. He said, we're going to get you 2.5% return, 1 to 2.5% return. He says, if I have 6 people calling that night and they just call for 2 hours, I'm going to get you like 12 to 20 houses in one night. He says, and that'll be for the week. He was right. That's exactly how it worked.
No way.
So I'm like, oh, this is amazing. In my first year, there was some days I was working 4.5 hours making $600 by myself. And I thought there was something better than that. But it was, it was me realizing, okay, there's a way that like this works. Like, this is who I am. And what I was seeking out was mentorship without realizing that that was mentorship. Like, back then there were not like I don't think there were formal entrepreneurial mentorship programs. You had to seek it out, right? So that's what I was doing. And my mom was helping, to support that and to sponsor that type of stuff. So that conversation I told you I had with my mom, or what was the thing that she taught me from the youngest age, she was teaching me about business. She was teaching me about employment. She was teaching me about career success. So there were things that I knew that someone my age normally wouldn't have. And it's only because my mom gave me this, allowed me to peer into a world that at such a young age, that some of that stuff I think was just instinctual at that point. It's very unique, very, very unique.
Yeah, it's like, that stuff's fascinating, right? Instead of just like, like you said, the relationship was different. It wasn't like little sun, rainbows and unicorns and weather. And yeah, you got educated. You got your MBA at a young age.
Yeah.
So this window biz, it catches fire. You're in the groove. Like, you're making money, running your own business. Things are kind of clicking.
Yeah. I was making money, but I was bored.
Because you had it figured out too quick?
No, like I think, I figured out the business. Like, I knew how the business worked. There was still a lot of business acumen to build. But I think I was just bored by squeegeeing. Yeah. And one of the things I always enjoyed, I like working with my hands. And I learned from a young age, I'm good with my hands. So if I had to do woodworking or swing a hammer or whatever, I could do it, and I could do it really well. And I maybe because of the drafting work, math, the construction work I'd done, I just understood construction. My thinking was, if you built something that was bigger, more substantial, and was harder to do, that must equate to more money. But I was wrong. I was quite wrong. But I hadn't given up the idea of having my window cleaning company, but I had a friend, and I asked Rob if he would want to run my window cleaning company. It didn't work out with Rob, but in my naivete was that it didn't work out, so it's just not good. So I just gave it up. So that was now the third thing I didn't finish. I didn't, it's hard to say. So the window cleaning became, that corporate entity became my construction business. So it didn't die on the vine. I just turned it into something else. But for me, it felt like I was something else I didn't finish. So what I should have done was go find another person until I found the right person to run it, because it made good money. I could have split the money with the person working with me, and I still would have made $300 a day, right? And doing my construction business, which would have been fantastic. And what I did learn about business, or what I have learned, is that the service industry is a fantastic business. When you find the right one, the one that you really work well in, they're great businesses. So I get into construction. I go back to Cochrane, and I convince Dan Can to let me build houses at 19. And they've met me, and I think it was the way I was as a teenager that maybe they said yes to, or maybe they just needed someone. I don't know. But my mom used to drop me off after I'd got those 2 car wrecks. My mom used to drop me off. She'd drive all the way to Cochrane, drop me off, and then drive to downtown to work.
Sheesh.
Yeah, very kind of her. And she'd say, well, what time do you need to be dropped off? I said, well, as early as possible. So that worked for her because she wanted to be at work early. Yeah. So sometimes I'd show up at like 6:30 in the morning. And because I wanted to be taught things and I knew what they wanted me to do that day, I would do all the lumber hauling before they showed up. I'd haul it all.
Good move.
Yeah. So I would throw all the plywood up. I'd throw all the 2x4s up, the long plates, the studs, everything. They'd show up and they go, what the fuck, Colby? Like, that's what you're going to do today. I said, yeah. I said, now I can help you build. I get to use my hammer, right? I got a brand new S-Wing hammer. I'm going to use it. And so they were forced to teach me because they had nothing else to do. So they teach me how to build turret roofs, how to build rake walls, how to do all this stuff. I knew how to build. And, I pigeonholed them. And they were getting upset because I do it every day. I'd show up early. So it forced them to teach me. But they didn't pay me for those extra hours, right? That was my cost. That was my educational cost. So I go back to Dancan and say, well, I want to build houses. So they give me houses. And I'm a perfectionist. I like things a certain way. So I didn't use skill saws to clean out, plywood on window openings, or I use routers. I did stuff that most people didn't do. I had built some fancy stuff with other people, so I learned some other skills that I hadn't learned there. And I started building houses. So now I got crews. The learning I needed to do there was some learning I needed to do like in construction, but the major learning, and it was a 10-year-long journey of how to be an employer, how to be a boss. And I wasn't a good boss. I didn't have patience. I was appalled by ignorance. I was hiring guys 10 years older than me. And unfortunately, they were always going to be in construction, right? They didn't have other options, but I didn't understand that. Yeah. I looked at them and said, well, how do you not know fractions? We'd learned fractions in grade 3. Like, you need to understand how to use a tape measure. We were taught in grade 3. I said, I never saw a tape measure in grade 3. I said, yes, you did. You saw fractions. Like, so I wasn't a good boss. And I was a yeller, and I was harsh. I could teach. I was definitely a good teacher, but I didn't have empathy. I was probably like the guy who taught me how to spell. Yeah. Right. I was just tough that way. But it was that business that I really learned how my style of business or my entrepreneurial acumen was really being honed. And what I had always done was I had always done like reno work. And, I'd take on kitchens, bathrooms, basements, additions, stuff like that. And even the guys at Dancan said, Colby, you need to go back to renos. You're too good to be building brand new houses. You need to be doing custom work. And I think they wanted someone working quicker. And I was more worried about doing it properly. Yeah. Right. I still made money, but that was more important to me. So I got into really doing renos and custom houses. I did lots of work in Mount Royal, in the mountains, Elbow Valley when it was brand new, all sorts of stuff. And I loved all of that because it was really challenging. But what I was learning was the second element of what I said to my mom when I wanted to move back in, and it's that people trusted me. So at 20 years old, I was going into people's houses, looking at a bathroom or whatever they needed, and I would go off and do a quote, and I would come back and I'd say to them, well, it's this amount. And people trusted me, and people would give me 50% of that money up front. I'd come, I'd do the work, and I would deliver. And, that's not easy. Like at 20, 21 years old, convincing people to give you 10 grand, that's not easy.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that there were things that I were bidding on that I didn't know how to do. So, but I'm a perfectionist. I'm like, well, I can figure this out. Back then, we had Rona, but Rona at the very front of it always had a library. There's all these how-to booklets and stuff like that. So sometimes I'd take on a job. Someone would say, well, I want this. So I'd go. I'd say, yeah, I can do that. I'd go to Rona. I'd look at a book. I would read the book. I wouldn't buy the book. I'd just read the book. And I would figure out what it is I needed. I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I knew a lot about construction already. There's a lot I already knew, but some things I hadn't done. Maybe I hadn't done tiling or something like that. So I would read it, figure it out. What I was really good at was quoting. I didn't screw up a quote like in 10 or 12 years. So, I'd do all this quoting and I'd come back and I would need to figure out how to develop a full quote. And the material was not a concern for me. I knew I had to make some money on the material. Yeah. I didn't really know what the percentages were, but what I didn't know was the labor. So I would go through the phone book and I would choose one company in the A's, one company in the G's, and say one company in the T's. And I'd say, I got this job that, I want to do at my house and whatever. And say, okay, we got to come and take a look. I said, no, I'm just looking for a rough estimate. What I'm looking for, I got 500 square feet of this stuff. This is what I want. It's just a rough estimate. And people, sometimes they call me back a day later. Sometimes they just tell me, well, it's about $5,000 or $10,000. So I figured out how to quote. And I did that for a few years, right? On anything I didn't know how to do. But, and there were some jobs, I never lost money, but there's some jobs where I would say I broke even, but I was learning how to do all of it. And I wouldn't leave a job until it was done right and it looked perfect. So my perfectionist ways worked really well. And so I would go through all these things and I came out and I figured out how to do all of it. And eventually I got very good at quoting. I was always good at it, but I got to a point where I could make really good money at it. And I was never the most expensive guy, but I was definitely nowhere close to the cheapest guy. I was pretty expensive. And my whole company for 8 years was all word of mouth. Never advertised, didn't do anything, just straight word of mouth work. So I really cut my teeth there. And when I helped my mother start our company, I really realized that business acumen that I had created. Yeah. One, I knew how to do the work. I knew how to market the work. I knew how to sell the work to a client. And I knew how to take a whole project full circle. So it was an amazing education. It was so great. And that was definitely something, I took myself through that. And that one, I wasn't seeking mentors in that whole company. That whole company was me teaching myself and going out. The mentors I had were the guys I was calling through the yellow pages, right? They're the ones giving me in. Yeah.
The building is very interesting. My dad was a Red Seal carpenter. So he built houses. Dad's 77, so built all through the 80s, 90s, 2000s.
Yeah.
Anyways, I grew up on job sites. So as you're telling these stories about hauling lumber and all the things, and there's a lot of moving pieces to bidding on jobs, to actually finishing the jobs. When you open up a wall, you're like, I didn't know that was there, or whatever. But that whole industry is fascinating to me because I grew up in it.
Yeah.
When that company, what's the transition out of that one look like? Why? You could still be doing it, arguably, right? It's one of those careers where it runs for a long time.
Yeah, it was the next failure point in my life, my career. I had never ran into a period of time where I didn't have another project already lined up to go.
Yeah.
I never double book clients. That was something I wasn't good at. I should have been double booking clients. Yeah. I never did it. I didn't think it was ethical. Right? That was my major issue with it. So I ran into a period of time. I didn't have work. And a good friend, neighbor behind my mom's, who had a son he's about maybe 15 years older than me. He was a plumbing foreman. And Tom is a great guy, very talented. Talented boss, talented foreman, very talented. He's not someone, if you were talking to him, you'd say, oh man, that's a really smart, brilliant guy, but he is. He's a very unique guy. And part of his charm and part of what makes him such a good boss is he really can relate to people, and he can really relate to his guys, right? And he creates autonomy for them. So Tom says to me, well, I'm in Panorama and I'm working on an Interwest project. And, there's a crew out here that they lost their decking crew. So they're looking for someone to build decks, and it's a good contract. So I came out, I drove out. It was a good contract. It made sense. Worked for me because I could build these decks. I could do them quick enough that I could keep up with the framing crew. And this in Panorama, when all the major developments started happening, kind of like their big second phase, there's a building called The Springs. It's about 84,000 square foot building, and the big swimming pool's in front of it. That's the building that I was on. I had never, ever experienced a job. I didn't have a contract. I had never experienced unethical behavior before in business. I was only 24. This decking contract was 90 grand, 100 grand, something like that, because a lot of decks, 50 or 60 decks or 80 decks to build. Intrawest is well known for being an organization where their builds, there's shifty stuff that goes on. Doesn't necessarily mean it's Intrawest doing it, but some of the crews they bring in. So the crew or the organization that I worked for, part of their MO was to hire things, underbid, get the job, hire things, not pay. So I worked for well over a month, build a ton of decks. They're all great. Everything's very professional. Don't pay me. Never not been paid on a job. Huge learning. So I don't know what to do. Tom feels bad. He says, well, the framing crew here just lost their foreman. I'm like, okay, well, I can do that. I've never built anything like this, but there's only a couple things I don't know how to do. So easy to figure out. So I take on a crew, 35 guys, never ran a crew like that before. And these are like transient workers. This is a rough group of guys. I'm running that crew, and it was tough. And I had to learn. I learned very quickly. I just knew instinctively there was going to be a mutiny here if I let any of these fuckers push me around. And some of them were big guys, right? They're really big guys. And I'm like, and I'm demanding perfection. And these are all like prefab walls. So we're taking them apart and fixing them. It was just a nightmare. But I could see that there was an issue with the money. And this is part, like I just had not learned this before. I always believe, well, if I do my part, you'll do your part. But I started saying to the guys that back then, the checks came on the bus, right? And part of the foreman's job is you go get the checks and you pay. So first 2 weeks, I go get the checks. I call the boss and I'm like, okay, and I'm working as a contractor. I'm not his employee, I'm a contractor. So they're paying me a flat rate for my time, and it's a good rate. And, I say to the guy, well, which bus is the checks coming on? He's giving me the runaround. Call him the next day, still giving a runaround. I tell the guys, I'm just honest with them. I said, I don't know. I have a funny feeling these checks aren't going to show up. And the guy's like, no, they'll pay. I said, okay, I just want you to know, like, if you don't want to be here, I'm not going to force you to be here, but I have a funny feeling. Day comes, no checks. These guys, they don't have anything. Like these guys, they're really relying on this. I don't have anything for that matter, but I'm not destitute. I'll go home or live with my mom or whatever. And it's a tough situation. And my feeling is, well, I said I'd do a job, so I'm going to finish it. So I keep working. And I think, I was lucky. Serendipity, I don't know. I twist my ankle incredibly bad. One of my guys leaves a 2x4 on the stairs. I'm wearing Sorels, and your foot is so loose in them, black and blue right up to my knee, like real bad. So I couldn't work. Money never comes. These guys, they're just shysters, right? This is their whole plan. So I get healed up. That guy's now gone, but I know where he lives. So I drive to Balgony, Saskatchewan to go find this guy.
Go for a drive.
Yeah. And it's Christmas time. My grandmother has just died. My mom's mom dies. So I'm in Winnipeg, drive to Winnipeg. I'm not doing well. I've lost all my credit. I was very honest with people. I told them, hey, I had some problem with my clients. I don't know when I can pay you. I will pay you, but I don't know when. So I lose all my credit. I'm only 24. And I drive to Winnipeg. It's very sad. It's just tough. You lose a grandmother. She's a good person. She had to end up having a tough life. It's my mom's now, her last parent has passed away. So it's just sad. I did the eulogy. My uncle wasn't in a position to do the eulogy, just couldn't pull himself together to do it. So I do it. And I'm driving back, and I'm going to stop in Regina. I'm driving back, and my mind is, not where it needs to be. So I'm not paying attention. I'm speeding. I get pulled over by an RCMP officer, and he goes, how fast you're going? I said, I don't. And he says, well, why are you driving that fast? I said, I just left my grandmother's funeral. I got a guy who hasn't paid me. I'm driving to Regina. I said, I'm just not paying attention. This guy's so nice. He goes, he says, you know what? He says, you need to slow down. We don't need another death. And he says, you have a good day. So very nice. So I go to Regina, and it's a very unique time in my life. Go to Regina. My father's family lived in Regina. That's where they immigrated to. My father doesn't live there. I know that. He's not a part of my life. But my grandparents are there, and I went and met them when I was 15. So I go to the hotel. All I have is cash. I've lost my credit cards. Go to the hotel, and I go in there. I say, I need a room for the night. And they said, well, need a credit card. I said, I don't have one. I says, well, you can't give you a room without a credit card. I said, well, I don't have one. I said, how about if I pay you up front, or I pay you for 2 nights or whatever? And they reluctantly say, okay. I give them the cash. And I decided what I would do was call my uncle, my father's eldest brother, and I say, Alger, I said, it's Colby Delorme. I don't know if you know who I am. I said, and he goes, oh, I know who you are. Okay. I said, well, I'd like to see my grandparents. I said, I'm in town for a day or two. I'd like to see them. I said, I tried calling them, but they're not answering. He says, Colby, they're elderly. They're already in bed. I go, okay. So he goes, I'll let them know you're here. I said, okay. So I hang up the phone. I drive out to Balgony, and I don't know where this guy lives, but I know his truck. But Balgony's not big, right? So I'm driving around. I don't see his truck. So I decide I'm going to stop at the coffee shop. I go to the coffee shop, and I walk in, and there that guy is. And he's talking to all the people in the town like holding court. He sees me walk in, and all he's trying to do is get me out of there. Says, well, follow me. We'll go back to my house. He goes in his back door, and it's like, the back door goes right into the kitchen. I follow him in there. He's leaning against the kitchen cabinets. I'm leaning against the doorway, and I'm like, where's my money? You owe me. So in that 5 weeks of being in Panorama, I lost 30 grand. Huge amount of money for me. And I'm like, where's my money? You owe me whatever it was, $20,000. And he's like, I'm still waiting for my money and all this stuff. And I'm being somewhat aggressive with my language. And I see him sort of gesture to the left, like, look. And I thought it was kind of odd when he did it. And I looked, and there was a shotgun in the corner of his kitchen. And I'm like, oh, man, like, I don't think I was thinking 20 grand isn't worth it, but I think that's what I was thinking, you know? I said, okay, well, you figure it out. I want my money. And I left. And I go back to the hotel. And when I go in there, my hotel telephone, the message light is blinking. So I listen to the message, and it's like, hi, Colby, it's Mika. Call me. I got to listen to the message 5 or 6 times. And when I was 15, I went to see my grandparents, and they had told me, you have a sister named Mika. She's older than you by 3 years. She doesn't know who you are, but if you want to meet her, you can meet her. So I did meet her. I didn't say anything to her about being my sister, but my grandparents told her the same story. So we both knew, and we had met each other when we were little kids. I didn't remember that. But, when you're not, it's like, when you run into someone that you know really well, but you see them in a different environment, and you're like, you're almost stumped of who they are because you're not used to, or you've never seen them in a ball cap, it's that kind of thing. So I'm like, Mika. And I haven't talked to her since I was 15, right? This is 9 years later. And I'm like, holy shit, that's my sister. So I call her, and we talk from like 9 p.m. till about 1 in the morning. And this is Christmas. So it's right in between Christmas and New Year's. And I go over to her house at like 6 a.m. I could describe every part of that day, like in detail, like great detail. Looking at her sideways, like seeing her side profile and going, those are my ears, those are my eyebrows. Very surreal experience and instantaneous love. So it's weird because you have like the toughest period of your life, or I think it felt like the toughest period of my life, and the new chapter, all in the same, like literally in the same 5-hour window. So to get back to your question, all of that created me moving into the business that I'm now in. It wasn't instant. It took about 3 years. Well, it took about 3 years. I was destitute, didn't have money, company was in failure mode. I went into a depression. I'd never been in a depression before. I didn't understand it, didn't know what it was. I sabotaged every work opportunity for 6 months. For 3 months, I didn't really leave the house. I lived with a buddy. Sometimes I wasn't even leaving my room. My cell phone would ring for a job. I could see it was a client, and I'd just not answer it. Didn't do anything. And of course, we didn't really have email back then, or I wasn't using email. And about 3 months in, I'm looking at my weights. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to work out today. Takes 3 more months, and this is the first time I go over the 200-pound body weight-wise, and I end up hitting 225 in 3 months. And I'm bench pressing 330 3 times on my 8th set. Like, I'm big. And I was always sort of muscular and thick, but, leaving high school, I was only 175, right? So, You know, I'm big. And of course, doing the kind of work I did, you know, you're always strong, but you're lean, right? So I do that. And I'm at the same time, my mother is starting Imagination Cards Inc. So our company now is Imagination Group Inc., but that's how we started. And I'm mentoring her because she's never owned a business. She's ran parts of big businesses, but she's never had a business. So I help her start it, and I'm one of her mentors. She went out and looked for all sorts of people. She took 9 months to build our business plan. Like, this is someone who's very intentional, and I'm helping. But what happens for me is between spending time with her and her giving me an opportunity to do something, and probably for her it was like, okay, well, I've been giving you money to survive, hoping you're going to get out of this funk, and me working out. So what I would do is I'd work out for 2 hours a day in the morning, and then in the afternoon I'd go to her house. I'd help her look at art, help explain how to price things, some of the things that she needs to look at, start, do whatever. And right at the 6-month mark, the guy that I lived with, he's no longer a friend, but the guy I lived with, his brother calls, and his name's Dan. I answer the call. He says, Colby, I'm just finishing up a basement framing job. They need, and drywall. He says, they need a mill worker to come in and, you know, build all the cabinets, do all the doors, baseboards, whatever. Do you want the job? And I just decided, I said, yeah. 3 days later, I'm leaving their basement with $12,000 cash, actual cash. And that month, I finish the job and I make $12,000 after all costs. And it just gets me going again. And from that point on, I end up getting some great jobs. A fellow named Henry D. Court, I think his company was Prestige Builders, and he was a custom home builder. The houses I built in Elbow Valley, the new developments in Chestermere, those are all houses that I built. They were all custom. They were all cool houses. And Henry was just a great guy. I partnered with someone else who he had hired first, and this guy wasn't great at pricing jobs. And I said, that's not enough money. I said, this is a custom house. This is a $25,000 framing job. He's like, he'll never pay that. I said, I'm telling you, it's not worth it. If we don't get 25 grand, it's not worth it. Henry reluctantly pays the 25 grand. And I still remember to this day, I told you I like words of affirmation. Henry comes to us after the first house in Elbow Valley. And it was a really unique house. Circular walls, fancy roofs, like 3 different roof styles within a singular roof. The roof took 2 weeks to build. Like, it was very fancy. And we're on the next house in the next cul-de-sac. And he says, what the hell, Colby? And Henry's one of these guys. He asked him, how are you doing, Henry? I am fantastic. Every day. Anytime you ask him, he's fantastic. He's a really positive guy. And he said, what the hell, Colby? I said, what? Is there something wrong with the house? He goes, no, I've just had the 4th subcontractor in there doing work asking me who did the framing. And he said, every single one of them said, whoever's doing the framing, don't lose them. Because I would frame for everyone. Because I knew all those different jobs. So I could frame for the plumbers. And some say, oh, that's not complex. There's very few that do that well and can build a custom house. And this thing was perfectly straight and square and everything plumb. So but what I realized was I was done. I was so done with construction. And that's a couple years after I've gone through this depression. And I was doing well. I was making good money. My mom's company, her Imagination Cards, in her first 4 months, she sold 45,000 greeting cards. Like, this woman has just got the Midas touch.
Crazy.
Doesn't matter what she does.
Crazy. She's
just very good at what she's, like I said, she's very intentional. And that wasn't me, that was her, right? I helped her get things going, but she made the stuff happen. And we had already been talking about the idea of me coming into the company. but we weren't big enough. We didn't have enough money. But I was at the point, I was starting to hate construction. Like I hated it. And it was one of those things where I didn't declare bankruptcy. I refused to declare bankruptcy. I paid everyone back in 12 months or within a 12-month period. I had lost all my credit. I was in a worse position than I was when I was 18 years old because I didn't know the game. If I had understood the game, I would have played it differently. I was working on honesty, respect, being authentic. And I realized, no, there wasn't, not everyone plays the game that way. So it's one of those things where now I was working and now it's just a job. And for me, that's just, there has to be some passion there. Yeah. So I was saying to my mom, I need out of this. And I was even looking at stuff like joining the Navy. And one thing I'm kind of scared of is like deep oceans. I remember being 14, I'm in Hawaii and I jump off the catamaran first. And we didn't have money, but this is the first trip I'd ever been on. And it was very nice. My 14th birthday. Yeah, it was really nice. My mom and her boyfriend. I jump off the catamaran. I'm in a snorkel, and I see a sea turtle. I'm swimming. It's about 12 feet or so. It looks about 12 feet below me. And it's swimming, and I'm swimming kind of above it. And it finally realizes that I'm there, and it dives, and it disappears. Like, I just freak out. I turn around. I get back to the catamaran. I get on there, and everyone's just getting off the catamaran now. They're like, Colby, come in. No, I'm good. I'm good. So my thinking, I want out of my business. I just want to do something totally different. My thinking is I'm going to take on a fear. I'm going to join the Navy, and I'm going to become a diver. That's my thing. I don't know where it came from, but I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. Well, my mom, when I used the term Bill earlier on, the fellow's name Bill, when mom was at MTS and I'd hear these positive things about me, Bill was one of these guys. Bill was in the telecommunications business most of his career, but he had always been in the Navy, Canadian Navy. And later in his career, he became a captain of one of our warships that we have. They were like really high end at the time in the world. They were really well respected. He ran one of those. So my mom said, Bill, you need to talk to Colby. This is what he's thinking. And unfortunately, this hit a period of time where Bill was the captain of the ship. And he had guys committing suicide on his ship. He's dealing with all sorts of stuff. So he talked with me. He says, okay, Colby, tell me where you're at, what you're doing. And he knew like what I did for a career and knew I was, self-made or whatever. And he said, well, why this? So I want a challenge. And he said to me, he says, well, Colby, I wouldn't tell many people this, but I'm going to tell you this because I know you. I've known you since you were really little. He said, you're not built for the Navy. He said, you're a leader. You are not a follower. He said, we break you down and we rebuild you in our image. And he said, it's not for you. It's not where you're going to do well. And he said, you probably would be good for us, but we're not good for you. I thought, so it took me a bit and I had to think through that. So, I sort of finished up my time and I still remember the house that I was working on in Chestermere. I just called my mom. I said, I need out. I said, are you ready? And she was like, oh, I'm not ready, but yeah, let's do it. So we built debt, and that's not something my mom's comfortable with. It's incredibly kind of her to sort of appease my needs, but also say, okay, like let's make this happen. And so that got me into the new career. And what was so unique is that very soon thereafter, my mom is, like I said, she's someone who sponsors people. She didn't keep me in the background. She didn't keep me from being able to grow or create opportunities. She would send me off and say, okay, well, we need to have a meeting. My connection there is the president of that oil company. You need to go have a meeting. He's going to bring in other people. Like, we need their work. I don't know. I was particularly good at it. I could talk with them, and I felt like I belonged. But I was shocked. I'm in this work, and I'm like, so people had such little respect for what I did in construction or in the trades. Yet now I'm here selling greeting cards, and I belong. And this is a way less complex business, way less, like nowhere even close. And it was so interesting because I was having these epiphanies. And the epiphany that I was having is that I always worked for people who had money. So I'd work, if I was in in Mount Royal, I'm working for people who are people that my mom associates with. So mom would always take me to events, from the age of 15 on. And sometimes I'd run into people and they say, Colby, what are you doing here? Like I wasn't supposed to be there. Well, now I'm selling greeting cards and I belong. And it was just odd. And I just realized, like, oh man, I'm never going back to that. Because it's not worth it. Like, this is just not worth it, that people see these things differently. And I have great respect when I see people, for one, if they can do trades or whatever they do. Like, we just don't look at it the same way they do in Europe. Right? So that was moving me into this new career. But I use the same skills that I gained in my window cleaning company that I still use today. Whatever my strengths are, they're still the same ones.
It's just like you just build on it.
Yeah.
So it's such an interesting story, right? Like construction, blue collar, do all the thing, to greeting cards. Wildly different, but there's like this interesting thread all the way through it. So where is it? What else? What gets going when you actually like figure out, I can do this?
Well, Marie and I, so my mother her name is Dr. Marie Delorme. Well respected across Canada and in our community. Her and I figure out how to work together. I'll use the term rocky first 2 years, but not with the way most people I think would see it. More like two alpha people who both have been used to being the boss. For me, it was, 8 years or 9 years of being self-employed. For her, when she left TELUS, she had 350 employees, right? So if she needed to get something done, she could pull 30 people off and 3 weeks later get a 6-month project done, right? So that's just not the reality in the entrepreneurial space when you're a small business. So we always had lots of unique conversations. She wasn't willing to put her house up, risk her, her house that was paid off, and risk money and things of that nature. She's like, work hard today, know exactly what you make, and then go do that tomorrow, right? More like a farmer's approach, an old time farmer's approach. You don't buy anything until you have the cash. I was used to all risk. I had everything I did. I built it from nothing, and you just make it happen. And I had very few things that I would say were true failures where I lost everything or what I just didn't. I didn't have those, I figured out how to forge ahead. So we had different approaches, but we had the same morals, same values, right? And same thoughts around money. So the couple things I had to learn, she was big on, government stuff you do immediately, you fill out the forms, whatever. I wasn't great that way. She said, that's the one thing that has to change. I'm like, okay, I get it. And I did. I was very serious about it. But we had to figure out how to work together. And we realized, and I don't know if we were having the conversation that there can only be one boss, like one person really moving things ahead or making the decisions, or if we used other language. But what we did, that's what we were talking about. That's where we were butting heads. And I don't know how, I wouldn't do it. I don't have children, but I wouldn't do it. She said, okay, you can be the boss. But there's a pretty big but, and I didn't realize it. I think she swindled me. She was a salesman. She said, you can be the boss, but you have to deal with everything. And I'm like, yeah, like I've always dealt with everything. This makes sense. No, very different. For me, for that, a 10-year period felt like a very lonely existence. It's not that she wasn't there, I couldn't talk with her. If I needed support, she supported me. But I dealt with the issues. If we were short of money, and like payroll was coming up, I was the one who dealt with the stress of it. And it was a lonely existence. And you probably know this, that it's a fable that businesses after 5 years they're good. They're established. That's not true. 10 years, yeah, like you're kind of established. You're kind of getting some seasonality to your business. You kind of feel good. Man, 20 years until you're like, yeah, I feel fairly secure in what I'm doing and I know things are good. I'm 33 years an entrepreneur and our company's 26. Wow. And I've ran the company for 24. We feel great now. And even now I'm sitting there, I'm like, I don't know the economy. Like this is, this is on the edge, right? But I could never thank my mom enough for everything that she's done for me. The care, I think the security that she's created, all of that. I could never thank her enough. But to truly put your child into a role and say, you can manage the money, you can manage the risk, you can manage the opportunity, you can create this into your own vision. I just don't know who's willing to do that. I don't know the type of trust that person either had to bring themselves to or had in order to make that kind of move. But that is that's a priceless and selfless thing to do. So I just felt, I still to this day, I'm just so incredibly blessed. And it just created this environment for us. So we've had a couple challenges over the years, and usually it's stress, right? You're spending big money and you're owed big money or whatever it is, and it's just always at the wrong time. But you got this person that's truly your partner. And people ask me, what do you think of partnerships? Oh, I wouldn't do it. And not because of my mom. I just don't think it's a great model. And people say, well, you do it. I said, yeah, I'm beyond lucky. Like this is a very unique situation that I'm in. And I know it. I know it without a doubt how special it is. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey, the business, and it's gone through in 26 years. Like it's crazy. You hear this, we're not a massive corporation. We're a boutique firm and a small gifting and tobacco manufacturing organization, but we operate like a big corporation. I've implemented tools that are not typical for small businesses. We report, we just the kind of things that we do to run the business is more what you would see in a large corporation. But when I've always loved stories of icons or businesses and where they've come to. And you look at companies like Levi Strauss, right? That was a cotton company that ran into a period of time where they couldn't sell cotton. So they had to do something with it. So they started developing denim. And that's how they got into selling jeans and denim jackets and all these things, So when I look at our company and the evolution that it's gone through, we've had sort of a similar journey. We were led by our clients. We were led by our community. We were gifted things by our community that allowed us the opportunity to do some of the things that we've done. And I was gifted the opportunity to build the company in my likeness. If you look at the company, if you look at the way we look, the structures we have, they're an extension of me. They're my arm or my leg. And it's because my mother allowed me to do that. And it wasn't something she was interested in. I was interested in it. And I just feel incredibly blessed to be where we're at, because as you know, there's a stroke of luck in this as well. It doesn't matter how hard you work. Sometimes you just need some luck to get there.
26 years is obviously a shift.
Yeah.
Are you solely focused on that? Does it occupy all? Does it kind of like satisfy all the things that are in you? It's a very interesting, special partnership with your mom. But like 26 years, is it doing everything that you need? And then does it? Do you start looking around, or how does?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. I still don't believe whatever I'm here to do, that I've done it yet. So I don't know what that is, but I just know I haven't done it. So our company was a greeting card company. It got into sort of corporate gifting, but with the same Indigenous imagery on it.
Okay.
We moved into the promo business, so we were running all of them in conjunction. Through some very unfortunate, an unfortunate internal fraud in our company, we started a ceremonial tobacco manufacturing company. It's incredibly unique business, something I'm very proud of. And we've had this business consulting firm, which is what Marie really ran, for 20 years, kind of on her own. I would help her when she needed it. Yep. But it's what I spend most of my time doing now, is traveling the country, working with communities, working with governments and whatnot. We still have our tobacco manufacturing company and a gift company. The gift company plays a role as the marketing area for our tobacco, because you can't market tobacco. So we have a really unique company. We work all across Canada, coast to coast to coast. But it's anyone who knows me will say, well, you're always working. You obviously have to be passionate about work, the amount that Marie and I work. But it's not enough. So from the age of 30 to about 2 years ago, I flipped houses. That's what I did in the evenings and on weekends.
You're working.
Yeah. So I got to go back. I finally got my groove again. It took me about 3 years for me to sort of lay down that stuff and say, you know what, I kind of miss that. And the major part for it, and you would understand this from helping your father and being in it, if you are developing something in a white collar environment, oftentimes you build something and you don't see what you've built for a month, 6 months, 2 years, sometimes 5 years. Well, when you go and build a house and there was no floor in the morning and you left that night, you finished sweeping the floor, there's a floor. And the next day you see all the exterior walls. And the next day you see all the interiors, and then you see the next floor. Like, it's very rewarding in that sense. So I think an element of what I was getting out of flipping houses was, one, I could build beautiful houses for myself. I think I had, 6 brand new kitchens, all back to back, 14 brand new bathrooms or more when I had 3 bathrooms in a house. All this beautiful stuff. Always lived in nice houses for the last, 18 years or so. But while I was building these really long-term things for imagination, I was getting these quick hits in my framing and my full house developments. And when I flip a house, they're professional. I've got $80,000 worth of tools, and I'm doing 96% or so of that house. And these are full guts, right? There's exterior walls, a roof, and nothing else. So, it's very rewarding. But through that whole time, and I don't know when my mom instilled this, but like I said, we didn't have a lot. Like, my mom wasn't really positioned for herself until I was in my early mid-20s. But through that whole time, it was always made clear to me that we need to give back. And I don't know that it was even implied in that way, or it was just a way of being or thinking.
Yeah.
So, from as soon as I started with imagination, I think I joined my first board at 27, and started, volunteering. And in those building years, you're just not busy all the time.
Yep.
Like, there's only so much you can do to force the work to come in. And I'm not a salesman. Like, that's not who I am. Marie's more of a salesman, but I think she even has a light touch to the way she does it. So I'm like a process guy. I like building processes. So when there wasn't work, there just wasn't work. So there were periods of time where I might volunteer 30 or 40 hours a week. I still get so much out of doing things for community, or being involved, or helping strategize at a governance level for an organization, or mentoring, a new entrepreneur, or someone who's maybe slightly into their entrepreneur journey, 1 to 5 years, or a youth who is going to speak at an event, or, is on their, post-secondary academic journey. So I got a lot of joy out of that. And luckily enough, in 2014, a group of us came up with the idea of creating a mentorship program for Indigenous post-secondary students. 2014, terrible year to be looking for money in Alberta to launch anything. We got enough to build it, but we didn't have enough money to launch it. We just could not find a way to pull it all together. But a couple of us sort of forged ahead through another 6 years. And luckily enough, in 2020, we were able to secure the funding in order to launch Influence Mentoring. So now that's where I would say most of my work is going, that really feeds sort of my passion of working with people. I get to work with people every day because of the consulting work that we do, but to do it for youth, or to do it as, how do we make measurable change in someone's life? And it's not us doing it. I think we're just like a petri dish. We're just creating the environment for this growth to exponentially grow in a very controlled environment. So we get to put effort in there. This morning I had my 1 hour weekly check-in with one of the directors who runs our charity. And we're figuring out a governance survey so that we can get into strat planning with the board, and it's enjoyable. So I get to spend every day, I get to put some kind of time into it. And I think that's what feeds me. And as soon as that thing is well situated and I'm just need to do the chair role, or maybe that gets handed off to someone else, I'll just go find something else. And there'll always be something. There's no retirement that's going to be had here.
When you lay it all out like that, to where you are right now, where are you with where you're at right now? How do you frame it up?
I'm grateful. As a part of the tobacco company, that's how I got my Indigenous name. So that Ustamau Napio means tobacco man in Cree. That was the very first company that I ever built where I had to ask for permission, or I felt like I needed to ask for permission. It was such an intentional company to build where I thought, oh man, this is going to be profitable. I didn't know how expensive it was going to be to build. So I was a little naive. Even after all those years, I still had something to learn. But it was something that, brought me back to my Indigenous roots. I think it got me closer to my grandfather. It gave me something where I just felt like this was about, the journey. This was about getting back to culture. This was something about everything other than the business.
Yeah.
And I'm not worried about the business. The business will take care of itself. We're not making enough money in it right now, but it does something so unique, and it's special, and it is a culmination of everything that I've learned and I've done, and it is by far the most technical business that I've had to develop. So it's a roundabout way of getting to your question of saying, I think this is the first time in my life that I felt like things have come together, that maybe I feel whole. Sometimes when I'm talking to a new entrepreneur, and I'm describing something, and they'll say, how did you know that? Like, how do you know that about my business? I'm like, we've been there. Like most entrepreneurs will be on that same journey, or say, well, I asked you a couple other questions because instinctively I can determine things based on some things of where you're at. And I said, well, you can guess like the money and you can guess all sorts of things. That's just experience. That's just time. But it's interesting because I'll step back from those conversations and go, wow, like I've collected all of these things and I don't covet them. I love sharing information with people. I think we all love sharing things that someone else doesn't know, and I don't think it's always, an ego-based thing, but it's one of these things where you kind of realize, oh man, I know that now. I can hand that off, right? I can share that. I can pay it forward. I think I'm at this point in my life where I feel like I've been blessed with a ton of things. And as through the Indigenous community and through EDI conversations, I think we've really refined and honed our beliefs around things, especially around privilege. And I'm acutely aware that regardless of all of these minority groups that I come from, that I'm incredibly privileged. And I've had conversations with people about privilege, and my feeling is the greatest privilege I was given was intelligence. It's not something that you can create from nothing. You either were given it or you're not. You can kind of build up some knowledge, but intelligence is something you either got or you don't, or you have it in varying levels. And I feel very blessed that I was given my hands and I was given my mind. And I just, in order to do the tobacco, I had to learn to be in ceremony. I had to learn to be more intentional. I had to learn, I think, to maybe not so much grow my understanding of empathy, but to grow the way that I look at the world in a more empathetic way, and be able to maybe just step back a little bit and maybe be a bit more global in thinking. And I think it worked well with all my backgrounds. I think I've always had to think of others because I'm made of others, right? I'm just I'm a lot of different things. So now I'm sitting here and I'm like, I've got this, all of this has just come together at the same time, or it feels like the same time. And it's maybe listening to someone like Bon Jovi who says, yeah, we were overnight success after we played in bars for 12 years or whatever. Their story, I think, is something very close to that. And it feels like that. Like, I cannot believe I turned 50 and I'm 33 years an entrepreneur. And I've been blessed with the opportunity to collect all of this. And I'm young enough that I get to still use it, And I'm, like I told you earlier, before we started filming that, I was just at a family friend's celebration of life, died at 34. Like that, I don't even understand the idea that either that person learned what they were supposed to learn in this life, so they're now moving on, or they were robbed of having that opportunity. But I see it and I'm like, man, I'm acutely aware. And I'm not going to waste any of this stuff. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do in this period of time. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's where I'm at. And there's elements of myself. I spent a lot of time with a shrink, a fellow named Dr. Norm Wellington. I used him more as a life coach. Saw him for 16 years, once a week for 9 years, and then off and on the remaining 7 years. Huge investment, but he said, I asked him once, I said, well, when are we going to be done? I think I was adding up the cash, and he says, well, you'll know. We'll both know when we're done, And I got very close a couple of years ago to feeling like, I think I've got to this place that I think I know me, I know where I'm at, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, or I know how I'm supposed to move through this world. Yeah. So I think that's where I'm at.
Really cool, man. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks.
We all have interesting stories, from the outside, we have no idea. To actually sit down and hear yours and you could feel it. You can feel it all the way. And that question I asked you, where are you right now? It makes a lot of sense. You feel like you're energized at 50, which is cool.
Yeah.
I end the show with one question. When I say Calgary, where's your head go?
Yeah. I spoke about it a little bit earlier on around this idea of, for me, and from the day we moved here, I felt opportunity. I remember driving out to the mountains for the very first time, and I could just feel the energy. It was unbelievable. Coming from Winnipeg, I was just like, and I've realized over the years, and I think I learned it pretty early, that anyone who comes here has a willingness to work, a willingness to start something or try, has the opportunity. It is not the opportunity to be successful in Calgary is not driven by pedigree, and there's a fairly big but, and I think I've seen it more over the last, maybe since 2017 to 2016, 17, is that there is an undercurrent in Alberta that I think pedigree keeps us from becoming one, becoming whole, to creating a space where people say, I just want to be there because it feels good. And that, I think it's always the double-edged sword, right? What makes you the best at what you do is also what makes you the worst. And I think I would tell anybody to move to Calgary, because I think it's a way to create something new for you and your family, or whatever it is that you're bringing here. And I think it makes that a very special place. And I think Calgary and Alberta is on a new horizon. I have not been to so many events in the last year or two, and I'm looking around and I'm going, this is a very different face of Calgary. Like, it is so diverse, and people come here and they're just like, this is the best place and this is fantastic. And they're bringing their communities and they're bringing their knowledge from elsewhere. I'm excited for where things are heading for Calgary. And I just hope that this division that we have is going to subside so that we can all reap the benefits, and not monetary benefits. There's an element of that too, but just the benefits of creating this type of environment where we're all moving ahead together. And I think Calgary, we kind of tear everything down and start anew quite often. So I think we can do it. We can even do it from a cultural standpoint as well. Mm-hmm. So when I think of Calgary, I think of all of that.
Thanks for taking the time. I know you're a busy dude, so I appreciate you taking the time. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.